Okay guys, what's up? So this is the guide for the spawns. I'm gonna teach you how the spawn system works. And it's somewhat, it's the same idea, but it's gonna be a little relative to how many players you have in a match. You can kind of influence, you can play with it a bit. Now I'm gonna try to draw a picture on the screen when I'm editing the video. Hopefully that'll help. Now I don't know if you ever studied geometry, but let's just say there's a in trigonometry there's a a circle and they have all the quadrants and all that. So I don't want to get all geeky on you, but that's a useful term to use here. But what you want to, I'm gonna try to draw the picture, but you want to imagine the map as 4 quadrants pretty much, because the map as a whole is pretty much a square and you're in the middle of that square. Now you can divide that square in 4 quadrants: the upper left, the upper right, the lower left, and the lower right. And how the spawns work, at least for co-op, probably is the same on multiplayer, but let's focus on co-op here. How the spawn works is the game is always going to give priority to spawn them on the opposite quadrant to where you are. So right now I'm on the lower left quadrant, so the game is gonna have them spawn up there on the upper right, which is the opposite to the lower left. Now every map has its middle point. Let me just finish the round so they don't bother me. This is on crushing, but this is for all difficulties, by the way. Only really difference is that on easier difficulties they take longer to spawn, so it makes it easier for you. Okay, so here's that. Now the middle point here would probably be this point right here. You see, just imagine that square. This would probably be the midpoint of the map, maybe even here. I'm not sure because I don't have radar, so it shows really small there for me, but you get the point. The same thing goes for for solo. That's pretty much it. It's really easy. It's the opposite of the quadrant you are in. So you can have those quadrants in your head. You know exactly where they're going to be spawning and coming from to kill you. Now, for more players, the effect is kind of compound. So that's the only real difference. The effect is kind of compound in the sense, if you have with 3 people it's kind of more complicated. I'll try to make a good drawing, but let's just say you have 3 people here on the lower left quadrant. Then they're all going to spawn at the upper right, because that's the opposite relative to all the players. So the priority of the spawn is going to go there, because in essence the game always wants to spawn them as far away from you as possible. So that's what it tries to do. But now the things get a bit different if there's like players on multiple quadrants at the same time. So let's just say there's a player here where I am on the upper left quadrant, there's a player on the lower left, and there's a player on the lower right. So at this point everyone is kind of, because every player has its weight, so to speak, on the spawn, in the influence they can have. So we have, let's just say, 1 player worth weight of spawn influence on all those 3 quadrants that I just told you. Now, like I said, there's only, for most of the maps, only 4 quadrants, so it's a square. So the only quadrant that would be free at this point, with 1 player there, 1 there, and 1 here, would be the upper right quadrant. So pretty much everyone will spawn there, given that those 3 players are separated in that way, positioned in that way. Now, another thing for more players that goes into consideration is, like I said, the middle point of the map Now, just besides the 4 quadrants, let's divide the map in two, just in upper parts and lower parts. If there's more players on the, if there's, let's just say 2 players on the lower portion of the map, then the game is gonna favor the upper part of the map, because there's more weight influence on the spawn that way, you know. Like I said, every player has its own weight influence on the spawn. So if there's 2 players below, the game is gonna prioritize the upper parts. So even if there's 1 player on the upper parts, they will still spawn on the upper part because there's more weight on the lower side, given that there are 2 players there instead of just 1. And that's pretty much how the spawns works. Now, yeah, how we spawn trap and do all that, you just have to balance it right. These weights on the spawn influence, and you can pretty much get him to spawn whatever you want to. But yeah, just keep in mind every map has its own fixed spots for them to spawn. For example, on this map, the upper left spawns are right here. There's one here. I think there's one inside this thing. There's one here. You see me doing the spawn on the video, the record video. There is now we're moving to the upper right quadrant. There's a spawn there. I think there's probably one there. So when I talked about, like, let's just say there are 3 players, one there, one there, one there, these spawns are the ones that are gonna get triggered as priority. And there's a spawn now. Here is lower right. There's a spawn, I think, around here. There's a spawn in the tower. There's some spawn somewhere around there. So yeah, usually most maps, they don't really have any spawns on the center, so no one's gonna spawn here even if you're on top of all the others. All the spawns are usually on the edges of the map, of all the quadrants. They're mostly on the edges. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Just keep in mind this is what you gotta have in mind to understand the system, is that every player has its own weight. It's equal to every player, the amount of weight they can influence on the spawn. But if you combine the effect of 2 players in one spot, you can have pretty much the 3rd guy anywhere he wants, and you can kind of force the spawn on him. And also, by the way, some maps they have like really they don't follow this logic so much. This is the base logic, but not all maps they work like exactly towards this logic. I'll give you an example of that. Is the remnants map, because the main spawn, I'll show you where the main spawn is. But the game, they just, like, even if you're like really not blocking any other spots, he still forces them to spawn there. I don't know, some maps are like this, other maps they work more towards the base logic. So yeah, when I cover the map guides, I'll go more in depth about each one. But just keep that in mind, that I'm giving you only the base of the spawn system, so you can kind of run with it. And I'm pretty sure the multiplayer works the same way. And for the objective gameplays like King of the Hill, then the thing that has the weight influence on the spawn is the heaviest weight, at least, is the actual objective. Now this is the main spawn you see me doing here on the video record of stage 6. This is like the main spawn, also on the opposite side. Like I said, it's always towards the edges. And this map also works the same way, like I said, with the base. This would be the, if you imagine the square, this would be the upper left, there's a spawn right in this cave. There's the upper right spawn, the quadrant. Then on the other cave there's also a spawn, upper right, and lower right, sorry, and the lower left, which is there behind that thing, would be the last quadrants. So pretty much every map works this way. The only difference for this, for example, in relation to prison, is that the game likes to force them there no matter what. It really likes to force them there. So even if maybe that spawn is open, the game still likes to force them to spawn here. So just keep that in mind. Some maps work like this. They might not, you might try doing this logic and they're not gonna follow exactly. But still, if you know where's the main spawn that they like to force them in, then you're good to go. Now, the last thing I can kind of point you out is that I'm pretty much giving you the layout, so to speak, for those like square maps. Because some maps, they don't really work like a square. They're more like a rectangle, which is the case of New Devon. Now, they are the most complicated ones. They're really hard to figure out the spawns, but that's how it works pretty much. So yeah, like this works like a rectangle. I'm gonna show you what I mean. Also do the drawings for you. And again, nobody really spawns at the center of the map. It's always on the edges. So this would be the bottom of the rectangle. If I can have the drawing now, this would be the bottom, and there would be the lower left. Sorry, this is lower left right here. This is the bottom. Yeah, the bottom, lower left. This is the upper. This is the upper left. This is the upper right. Right here, the upper right. And I already showed you the bottom, and the lower right is right there. So yeah, the same thing goes here. The game favors the opposite. So for example, if I'm here on this solo, if I'm here on the right, he's gonna favor the opposite side. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works, guys. So I mean, when I go in depth on every map guide, I'll show you the spawns and all that. Just want to give you the basis of the system, how it works, and that's pretty much it. Later, guys.